Hello and welcome to another episode of With Enough Prep Time. I'm your host, the Nerd Man, and today I'm here with Ian Lying, who writes for Far Out. He's done an article on the Zack Snyder's Justice League that I wanted to review the review as such. I'm going to read out just the first bit of it and then we'll do some introductions. So this may be Zack Snyder's comic book masterpiece, but it also represents something greater still. Sorry, the article is called Zack Snyder's Justice League Review, A Triumphant Return. This may be Zack Snyder's comic book masterpiece, but also represents something greater still. Fashioned as a type of rebuttal to the studio executives who once denied the director his vision, Snyder has finally stepped from the sidelines to deliver the sprawling, superlative mythology he feels DC fans deserve. So, tell me about your experience watching. First, introduce yourself, please.
Okay, my name's Owen. I'm from Ireland. Owen. I met you. It's okay. It happens all. I met you a few years ago when I lived in Prague teaching English, and I've been a DC fan for all my life.
We're Facebook friends. We all often comment on each other's posts and stuff like that, and we've kind of kept in contact through that quite a bit. So sorry about that. I knew it was either Ian or Owen, and I went for Ian instead. But because it's a interesting spelling there. Carry on anyway.
When I was about 11, Batman was my favorite superhero because of the noir-y kind of dark tinted elements. I found the likes of Spider-Man or Superman too colorful and vibrant. I liked that Batman was so brooding and twisted and nefarious.
Is that
still
the case till today?
I think so. I went to Batman versus Superman when I lived in Madrid, and there were two of us there. The other guy was like a big Frank Miller head, and we both thought, oh my god, Ben Affleck really is something. And then the rest of the world, the film was rubbish.
I didn't think so. I thought the film was pretty damn good. I just we discussed this off camera, which is my major problem with Zack Snyder, and even certain problems I have with this film is that he's really good at creating grand mythology out of superheroes, and putting this layer of hyper-realism over the grand mythology. So these Greek style mythological larger than life heroes, but and their stories, their sprawling stories, as you mentioned. But he has a problem with sticking to the canon or rules of the character, which isn't necessarily a problem. We shouldn't be like, this is a comic book and therefore it's Bible, and if we're going to adapt it, we have to stick to everything that the comic book does. But what it seems to do in Zack Snyder films is he's so he's decided almost stubbornly to depict these characters as, say, like killers, for instance. And then, but you're watching the narrative of his film and it seems to go against the narrative of his film, where, like in Batman v Superman, it's like, wait a second, if Batman didn't kill and Superman didn't kill, this would be a better story. Like the exact same story. But if they didn't kill, it would make much more sense of their motivations. Like Batman's wants to kill Superman because he thinks he's this dangerous, potential dangerous overlord who's killed many people. And Batman has, since gone on a darker path and become more brutal because, of his fear. But it would make much more sense if the first person he was truly contemplating killing, as brutal as he was with all the criminals, the first person he was truly ready to kill was Superman. And the other way around, Superman obviously is, saying that Batman is this dangerous vigilante of the night, and yet he's killing terrorists in the in the first scene. He kills this black terrorist guy, and you think that's unnecessary. So as I'm saying, as I said, it works against the narrative for me. What do you think of that?
No, I agree. I think Superman was mishandled in Batman versus Superman. I never understood why he wanted to defeat Batman. Even after watching the extended cut, it just didn't feel like, why are you fighting this guy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk about this film rather than we can reference back to Zack Snyder's older films later, but let's talk about this film. We both loved this film, right?
Yeah, I gave it 5 stars.
Yeah, you gave it 5 stars, 1 star more than me. I had to dob it a star. So can you tell me some about your favorite scenes and what exactly about this film was, so incredible, like, in your words? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
That's all right. I don't want to disrespect Joss Whedon. He's a very good filmmaker. When I watched this, I thought he completely missed the point. There was so much emotion and humanity from the likes of Steppenwolf, and he's a CGI character, but there's so much backstory and nuance to nearly everyone that he discarded from. I don't understand why he discarded nearly all of it. I mean,
by the way, this is going to be heavy spoilers, by the way.
Sorry,
yeah, go on.
Cyborg's backstory, he loses his parents. He's trying to forgive his father. Oh, that was so beautiful. Yeah. He meets Wonder Woman, who says, "You've got a gift," and he shows her his robotic body. How is this a gift?
Yeah, I think the really about that scene, one of the things that really stood out for me in his origin, and I think it's a standout for a lot of people, is that thing where they're showing how his powers work, but they managed to even get emotion into that, where you see that he can interface with all the different technology so as to essentially build a picture of a woman's life that he's just watching on the road. He just sees her. I believe that's what it's suggesting, that he sees this waitress on the road and something about her just piques his interest. So he's able to look through various technologies and, get together a narrative of her life and her struggles. And then he decides to give her the 100,000. And the music behind that, the score is beautiful and sumptuous and really elevates that scene. But also the acting is incredible by Ray Fisher during that whole scene, and his father, and so I thought that was all really, really well done on the part of Zack Snyder. I thought, because there's so often when you're exploring a superhero's powers and what he can actually do, it's kind of like almost like an unemotional, like, oh, let's just figure out what he can do kind of scene. This one really brought a lot of emotion to, at the same time explore how he works.
Absolutely, no, I agree. I also felt Ezra Miller's backstory was there was more depth to it. That the father, who is the criminal, is pleading with him, abandon me, live your life, and then he does. He becomes the.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, yeah, you know, what would you say the main thesis of your article is? Because I really like it, and I just want you to share what that main thesis is with people. Why do you think it's elevated above the Dark Knight, or in the realm of the Dark Knight for you?
Well, I would put it equal, I think the Dark Knight is a better movie, but I think the attention to the mythology and drawing it out like it's a long painting rather than a 2 hour story, the way that Whedon went with it, because I don't think Snyder's going for the conventional beginning, middle, and end like Whedon so desperately wanted to do. Instead, he's trying to detail, and it all comes to this crashing crescendo at the end. In that kind of, in the way that, say, Greek myths did back in the day, you know, the way they built up, and then they came to that. Yeah.
Right. Like, the siege of what am I thinking of? With Helen of Troy. You've got this kind of big sprawling event that is and war that is happening on all fronts, whether it be, you know, just the personal relationship between Paris and Troy. Is it Paris and Troy? I think Helen of Troy. Paris and Helen of Troy. Anyway, and then you've got, you know, what's happening on the battlefield with Achilles, and all of the different kind of characters surrounding that, making up this, you know, one kind of story or big mythology that you know, ends in this incredible war. And I think that's right. That is kind of the model that Zack Snyder kind of uses here. So let me ask this, that there's some things that I wanted to take up with you in this. I wanted to ask you about your favorite scenes before I take up with you about this particular thing. But how well do you know, like, DC kind of comics? Are you like quite familiar with like the Flash and Superman and all of these characters, or is it just you were more interested in Batman?
I'm most au fait with Batman. Like The Dark Knight Returns is the Frank Miller comic. The Dark Knight Returns is a favorite of mine. But I have read like Grant Morrison, Mark Miller, and some Wonder Woman. I wasn't too aware of Cyborg pre Joss Whedon, but he's also in Doom Patrol. I've read some of those before I watched the TV series.
Okay. The reason I was going to ask you is I'm a huge fan of DC comics. I really kind of got into it because I was looking at it as modern mythology, and I was reading it alongside kind of Greek mythology and trying to figure out, like, are there that many connections? Some of the connections between the two are kind of overstated, I think. It's not a one-on-one comparison of, you know, what a hero is. You know, you don't find arch nemesises in necessarily in Greek mythology that kind of survive too long, or, you know, like the Joker or Lex Luthor or things like that. But one thing that I do think that the two share in common, that this really brought to the front was, and I want to ask you what you think of this, is that DC mythology has always been about gods and their dysfunctional parents and or families, right? So whereas kind of if you look at like Marvel stories and you know, films, it tends more to be about people who've been in freak accidents of a scientific nature, right? So it lends itself really well to this kind of action adventure modern action adventure kind of style. But there's a kind of Greek tragedy stroke mythology element to DC Comics, because, you know, from Batman to Superman to Wonder Woman, it's always about that family dynamic, a god who was brought up by a specific family that you know, that means that the traits of that god could only have been developed through this particular style of parenting. So, you know, Batman obviously is the orphan whose family are shot in the alleyway due to like this, you know, terrible crime. Whereas obviously Superman is, you know, sent off to Earth by very loving parents who happen to be scientists, and they send him to the best American family. In you know, if he had have landed on any other farm, any other place in the world, he would have been a tyrant, essentially, a terrible influence on humanity. But in virtue of him being sent to this kindly family, fortunately for all of us. But what Zack Snyder does, the reason I'm bringing this up is what Zack Snyder does, I think, in this film is explores that in all of the characters, which I think is an amazing feat, to be honest. What do you think of that? So gods and their dysfunctional families as the kind of theme of...
And I think you're onto something. It's funny, I read a comic John Cleese of Monty Python wrote, which was about Superman growing up in England, and it was so boring, sorry to say. It was so dull, so pedestrian. I think that's the values, that an alien from way far away is the archetypal American. And
right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go on, please. I'm listening.
And it takes a warrior to, you know, from Themyscira to, you know, bring peace to Earth in a war made by men. So she abandons
right,
her.
exactly.
Yeah. It takes a brave woman in nothing more than armor to, you know, unite men in a world of peace. When she's secluded in this wonderful island that, you know, harnesses the brilliance of women.
I think that for me is a really interesting kind of element of this particular story, and I think it got it right in a way that certain films of his in past didn't. Like you know, Man of Steel really didn't have those kindly parents. It felt like Superman was sent to parents that ultimately, you know, would have turned him into this selfish, person. You know, he's like, should kids die? Maybe, you know. Whereas this film really corrects that, and I think, you know, one of my favorite scenes was when Jor-El and the Pa Kent, Jonathan Kent, are speaking over Superman's first flight, and you know, it's like the classical, it could almost be ripped from some of the early comics where it's like Jor-El saying love the people and whatever, and it's kitsch and it's cliche, and you know, it's straight pulp comic booky. What, you know, what Pa Kent is saying: fly son, fly, show yourself to the world. But it contrasts so well with the somber, you know, seriousness with which Zack Snyder takes the mythology.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think on Man of Steel, he was basically a director for hire, because David Goyer wrote it concurrent to writing The Dark Knight Rises circa 2011, 2012. And Christopher Nolan might have directed it, but ultimately chose not to. And he approached Zack and Deborah Snyder with the script.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm sure he was like a, less there during the creative kind of elements, but I thought that he added a level of cynicism to Superman's universe that shouldn't really exist there. There should be like an earnestness about Superman's mythology, and I think that earnestness contrasts with his visual styling so well that it creates these powerful scenes. So if I'd say anything, is like all of these superheroes in this Justice League were really, really earnest, to the point that even Batman, was like, I'm not relying on reason, I'm relying on faith, and that was one of my favorite things about this film, is like this Batman who's gone through this redemption arc through BVS, and then he comes out here and he's like, I believe in the kind of faith. Have you been at all looking at some of the critical reception of this movie, and could you tell me what's your opinion of the critical reception to this movie?
Well, Mark Kermode,
you wrote about it a bit in your essay there. Article
Kermode,
or review company.
That's okay. Mark Kermode gave it a bit of a kicking, but then he seems to give superhero movies kickings all the time. So,
okay, tell me what was his reasons, and what did you make of it?
He said the Whedon cut was, incomprehensible to follow, whereas this one was just dull and ponderous and he didn't seem to gauge into it. He did, however, equate it by saying that he's not a fan of Heaven's Gate, which is this sprawling Michael Cimino film from 1980. Yeah. Empire gave it a good review. I know that it's got something like 75% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I was saying the critical reception, what I meant is that a lot of people are saying this one is still too dark, and it's too overly long, and I'm talking more about that critical reception, which, for the most part, I think there's a lot of positivity about the film, but I think there's also the classical Zack Snyder criticisms of this film, like, that it's overly long, that it's not different from the Joss Whedon film. That's what we're getting a lot of, and that the characters are all miserable and depressed, and that kind of thing. So I was just curious as to if you'd read about that and what your thoughts were on that.
I heard some of those criticisms. Miserable and depressed. I think it's more a case of these characters are facing a threat they've never faced and don't think they're up to the challenge, but feel they have to rise to the occasion, which I personally enjoy a lot more than the izzy wizzy Marvel approach. I don't want to slam Marvel, but people said Endgame was very heavy, that they were bringing a lot of gravitas. I didn't think there was. There was maybe 20 minutes of people drinking in bars in Endgame and thinking, what could we have done differently? Whereas this one, they really were carrying, like Ben Affleck is carrying the death of Superman all the way through. And I thought that was almost Shakespearean, to go with another.
I mean, I would say that Endgame, like a lot of the gravitas came from Thanos and his story arc through Infinity War and Endgame, but a lot of the usual Marvel tricks were played, which undercut a lot of the drama. Whereas this movie and the DCEU in general, I think, is better at this, at staying with the drama. Through whether it's Shazam or Wonder Woman or this film, they're not afraid to kind of stay with the drama of a situation and let the let it play out to its natural conclusion without having to undercut it with like some kind of humorous remark. But you know, the thing that in this movie, though, that I don't understand about that particular critique is that I feel that this movie is terribly joyful and playful and hopeful, and in a really uplifting, emotional way. So I'm kind of worried about like, what am I, you know, am I emotionally not responding in a normal human way? When I felt like, you know, like that, we talked about it already, that waitress, when he gives her the 100,000 and he just has that smile, you know, knowing that he's done something good, that he really enjoys, you know, as much of a curse that his superpowers is, he's really starting to see that they can do some good. And there's a lot of joy. I think the Flash characters, particularly, well, I'll tell you as we go into our favorite scenes, one of my favorite scenes, because the Flash is one of my favorite characters, is right at the end. I don't know if you remember this, but Dr. Stone, Silas Stone, which is Cyborg's father, is discussing, he's on the tape, because basically Cyborg had crushed the tape before where he was explaining his powers, and then he says, I want to speak to you as a father now. And then he starts speaking to him as a father, right? And through, you get these little vignettes of each of the superheroes that are matched to what Silas Stone is saying. And one of them is really, really beautiful, where the Flash is just literally running in the Speed Force and he's smiling as he's running. I don't know if you remember it. It's like a splash page out of a comic. It was really, it almost doesn't look like Ezra Miller because it looks like a cartoon come to life almost. Do you remember this scene?
I remember. Major criticism.
One of my favorite things. Go on.
A major criticism I had with the Whedon cut was how many jokes were shoehorned in. Like, I remember in the cinema I went to see it in, when Affleck goes, "Oh, there's something definitely bleeding," as a throwback to Batman versus Superman, the place started groaning. Nobody thought it wasn't clever. It was contrived. It was cheap.
Yeah. I think I felt the same about that lasso scene where Aquaman sits on the lasso, and I'm just like, and you're just going to point out the different reasons that your teammates are, you know, have problems or issues, and then the only thing you can think to point out about Wonder Woman is her looks. Oh, and you're so beautiful. I just thought it was distasteful, and I'll say this about comparing, since we've gone on to comparing the movies, you seem very harsh on Joss Whedon's cut, and I have to say I don't think he did a bad job. Now I go back and look at this movie, I mean, a lot of the movie really is Zack Snyder's movie in his movie, in the Joss Whedon cut. It's just that I don't think he knew the vision for the scene. He didn't know where Zack was trying to go with those images. And so I think actually the team dynamic in Justice League is actually a little bit better. That's one criticism I'd have in comparison. So go on, tell me, do you want me to give you an example, or do you understand what I mean? I can give you an example. I think there was a little bit of more back and forth push to resurrecting Superman, which in Joss Whedon's version I thought really worked. That back and forth push to, whereas in this one it's kind of like, oh, we just have to explain this, and most of them will agree, and we'll just use Aquaman as like a small voice of contention or as basically a small voice of I've forgotten the word right now, but like that he basically was the one person who thought the plan may go astray, basically.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the team dynamic there?
Well, I think I'm criticizing Whedon a lot. I don't think it's his fault. He was given a task. He had very little time. He did what he could.
Yeah, he was given a thankless task.
Yeah, exactly. And Snyder left. Yeah.
Go on, I'm listening to you.
No, Snyder left under very, very sad circumstances. He lost his daughter during the film, or just before the film. I can't. But he left under very, very sad circumstances. Snyder's cachet in 2017 wasn't very high. Batman and Superman versus Superman had bombed both critically, commercially. And here's a guy who's made 2 Avengers movies that were huge hits. He was trusted to make a 2-hour movie out of it, and in that sense, he did an okay job.
I think he did. I think it was a reasonable, looking back at it now, I really do think it's a reasonable job. It does have a lot of the flaws that are found in the Avengers movies, but that's just who he is as a director. I wanted to read out a little bit of your essay here, because I was kind of curious of you kind of expanding on this part. If I can find it, I had it like highlighted, I thought. So it's sepia tone dismissed. Whedon, I'm looking for the word Whedon here. Can I find Whedon? It's some bit about, here we go. So, not since The Dark Knight has a superhero film carried this much gravitas to a source material once penciled at pre-adolescent males, or put so much emphasis on the individual arcs of a committed ensemble of custodian players. And without Joss Whedon and his penchant for sight gags, not to mention his blatant disregard for women, the feature walks down a more spiritual path as each of the heroes searches within themselves as a means of absolving themselves from destiny, distraction, and death. I want to take that apart. So, first of all, to say, not to mention Whedon's blatant disregard for women. So I wanted to talk to you about that first. What was the meaning of that?
Well, like
philosophical pickle says it. He doesn't like the hamburger scene.
I felt in Whedon's original there was too much of the guys ogling her, and or just the fact that she was gorgeous. She's part of the team. She's the most powerful in terms of physical strength, I'd say. There's a hint of
outside of Superman,
of course. There's a hint of it in Snyder, but it's not quite so heavily sexualized in the way that it was in Whedon's original. There's even a small bit in Whedon's cut where Gal Gadot smiles as Cyborg, and Flash kind of does this eyeball thing saying, "Have they slept together?"
Really?
Yeah, it's a very small bit, like, well, what's going on here between these two? Which is just like, yeah.
I really don't remember that. I was going to say that I agree that Whedon, there's a lot of casual sexism in Whedon's cut, but I was wondering, just from my point of view, like, I have you've given it 5 stars, I give it 4 stars. I don't quite see it as a masterpiece. I see it as a near masterpiece, not quite a masterpiece. But I think everything in Zack Snyder's movie, including the flaws, are elevated to a higher, more intellectual level. So I would say that there's a lot of sexism in Snyder's movie, just not as obvious as say Joss Whedon. So, for instance, let's talk about this final epilogue scene where he kills off Wonder Woman. This is where the story's going. He kills off Wonder Woman, he kills off Lois Lane, and he kills off Harley Quinn. And really, the only reason for this is to advance the story of three male characters who are arguably less popular within this franchise than their male counterparts, which is the Joker, Superman, and Ben Affleck's Batman. So I was wondering, what did you think of stuff like that? And I also thought that in terms of Wonder Woman and her involvement, especially in the final act, that that there was a hyper masculinity to Snyder's works, where the man is the real kind of big savior or the person with the big ideas. Whereas Whedon, it seemed like there was much more of an equality between the DC Trinity. Wonder Woman was elevated a little bit in terms of her leadership, and even it was discussed about her, why she should take on a little bit more of a leadership role in Whedon's. So, what do you mean? What's your thoughts on that? Start with the epilogue, and then you can go on to the rest of the stuff.
Well, for the epilogue, it's clearly in Batman's head that this is all happening. So maybe you could read that as a commentary on his ingrained sexism. That that
you could. But let's say we read it literally, and we're talking about it as if it's. Please, everyone watching, please do click on. Give me a high five. Give me a click on the like button. But if you read it literally, I think that's where the story is heading, right? Like if Zack Snyder is to get another movie, that's the direction he wants to take it in.
I don't think he can get another movie.
I hope he does. I think there's a possibility, but I think, and we'll talk a little bit about this. There's because you mentioned it in your article about some of the stuff that happened in the background of the production with people like Ray Fisher and stuff like that. But yeah, if you could, just curious about your take on the kind of sexism within the Snyder, or do you not see it as sexism?
You make a very valid point. I think like Themyscira is much more prominent in Snyder's vision than it was in the Whedon cut, and they're moving the chess pieces from another part of the planet, and it's like everyone's fighting this great battle. And some people have commented that in the Whedon original, the armored suits are that little bit sexualized as they're fighting Steppenwolf, and I didn't see it this time when they were fighting Darkseid.
I didn't. They were fighting Steppenwolf as well in this one, yeah. But yeah, I didn't really see that. That wasn't a major problem. There was a little bit of chest, not chest, pardon me, stomach, midriff showing in this one, but it wasn't dwelled upon. And where it was dwelled upon a little bit, it was more to show the strength of the women rather than as a sexualizing of them. So that didn't bother me too much. My main thing was that you notice that in Snyder's films that women are often undercut as, their contribution is almost somewhat insignificant. So Martha Kent is there talking to Lois, and she's giving her this pep talk and doing her Martha Kent thing, but he doesn't think that relationship between women is important enough that he doesn't undercut it with, you know, a reveal of Martian Manhunter. So really it was the Martian Manhunter, it was the big masculine hero who was doing all the, you know, the heroic good stuff, as opposed to you know, just having it be a mother and daughter-in-law conversation, and sticking with the authentic. And it's terrible because I actually think that was the woman who plays Martha Kent. I thought that was her best performance and her best character work, and it was just taken away from her.
I can see that. You also have to remember that Zack Snyder also directed Sucker Punch, which, while it's not a very good movie, at least was a comic book movie about women. It preceded Harley Quinn by about 10 years.
So Philosophical Pickle says the Amazonians had a better team dynamic than the actual Justice League. I don't agree with that. he has a thing, Philosophical Pickle, and maybe we can pick up on this, is that he thinks that that. By the way, Philosophical Pickle, do you want to join us? If you want to join us, you're more than welcome. I'll send you a link. He has a thing where he thinks that the Justice League didn't have they didn't have much dialogue together in the final battle scene, and he thinks that, you know, in comparison to something like the Avengers, that's a really kind of important thing to kind of bind the team together.
I respectfully disagree. I think the fact that they're tasked together to finish this is more important than bouncing off each other.
Right, that was my thought. You know, you don't go into a battle or a war. You go into a battle or a war with a plan, and then you execute upon said plan. You don't kind of talk to each other. No problem, man. Thanks. You don't spend much of the time talking to each other to make sure you continue on with the plan. But I also think that they really had some good moments of communication with each other. The team dynamic wasn't as good as in Whedon, as there wasn't as much conflict between the team. Like, they all seemed to be agreeing with each other on what they ought to do, apart from, say, Aquaman. But I think that the little moments of encouragement, especially like Wonder Woman with Aquaman, Wonder Woman with you know, Cyborg. You know, there's a particular moment where, like, you know, when Cyborg decides that he's gonna interface with the mother boxes, that you know, Wonder Woman's like, no, you can't do that. I won't let you. You know, she's like, this is she explains basically why he shouldn't do this, why it's such a risk. And I thought it's little moments like that I really enjoyed, both about the Wonder Woman character and about you know, the dynamics between the teams. So there's quite a bit of talking here and there. But should Superman at least say one word to Batman when he gets there? Like, what's happening? Who's the villain? Sorry, you guys can get back to the original discussion. No problem. What do you make of that?
I think the silence works well in Henry Cavill. You know, he's very handsome, very striking looking, and he's there to finish a job. There's time for chit chat later.
Right. Yeah. No. That's my kind of take on it as well. Not that he's very handsome and good looking, but he is. That chest, man. Jesus Christ! What the hell? Like, it was even more juicy than the Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. It was really looking incredible, his chest in this movie. Yeah. Yeah, it's just when you get those uncomfortable feelings about yourself, and when you're watching these movies. Yeah, I see what he's saying, and I think that there's something to be said of that. But I also think that this idea of criticizing a movie for not being another movie is really problematic. Um,
it's like when people said, he wasn't like Connery or Moore because he wasn't, so quippy. But why should he be? He's Timothy Dalton.
Right, exactly. He's a different take on this character. He's a different take on James Bond. And they still had the core characteristics of James Bond. Thank you. You're a Timothy Dalton guy. I'm a Timothy Dalton guy, man. Like, I love his James Bond. He's amazing. He's so underrated as James Bond. Daniel is my favorite. I think Daniel did the best in the first Bond movie he did, Casino Royale. I think that was his best. And then it's Timothy. And funnily enough, I like Timothy and Roger Moore. Go figure. Those are my two guys. So yeah, let's go back to the rest of this article here. So did you have an answer really for the epilogue and the killing off the three women to advance the male story, or undercutting Martha like that? Did it bother you, or did you? Is it something? Because I think in Zack Snyder's filmmaking, this is a problem. I worry like.
The nightmare scene didn't bother me because it is a nightmare scene, and I'm not a psychologist, but you could say that it's a figment of Bruce Wayne's.
Let's imagine that it's real. So the next movie, it's Wonder Woman's dead, Lois Lane is dead, and Harley Quinn is dead, and the reason for that is so as to continue some kind of conflict between Batman and Superman and Joker, when we've already seen a Batman vs Superman movie.
Okay, that I wouldn't be too comfortable with, but unfortunately women don't come across very well in graphic novels. I mean, The Killing Joke is problematic. As much as beautiful a story as it is, Gordon's daughter gets off very badly in that.
Yeah, I mean, but then again, I don't mind a villain doing villainous stuff. Like, that's what a villain ought to do. He should do stuff that, in a sense, we find appalling. He shouldn't, a villain who doesn't pass the test of the Me Too generation is probably a good villain. It's like you want them to be somebody who crosses the lines of moral convention. Yeah. So I didn't mind that, but when you're taking out multiple women just in order to advance the story of men, and to be fair, they kill Aquaman as well. So they kill Aquaman and three women, and then three of the males survive. So Flash, Batman, and Cyborg survive. And it's going to follow them trying to fix the timeline.
If Zack continues that way, I hope he alters it a little. I doubt he'd kill all those women. But at least the most enthusiastic of all the warriors was Mira. She wanted, to avenge Aquaman. I will bally kill him for what he did to my man.
Right, you didn't like the English accent. You didn't like. I really have no problem. Like, she's not the greatest actress ever, but I didn't think. Honestly, I like the English accent. I like the fact that she was trying to do something different from the Aquaman movie. And I really liked, I haven't mentioned this yet, but I loved everything to do with the Atlanteans in this movie. I liked the fact that they spoke to each other through like an almost dolphin, like echolocation type of language.
Yeah.
Right? Did you notice that?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and then them having the air bubbles so that they can speak to each other in a way that we can understand. And I had a conversation actually with Philosophical Pickle on this as to how that kind of works with the Aquaman movie itself. And to me, it's like, you know when you see a film where there's a dog, and at first you just hear the dog barking, and then eventually the dog starts speaking English, and you know what the dog is talking about, or it could be any animal, right? It could be like a cartoon animal, and they're trying to. At first, it's just like it's barking or it's meowing or whatever, and then you go into the perspective of the animal or the dog or whatever, and you can kind of hear what they're actually saying. So for me now, I think that that's how the Atlanteans speak on the water. It makes sense that they're actually speaking through this kind of echo location, but for our sakes, as the viewers, we see them speaking in English.
Well, Patty Jenkins did something similar in the new Wonder Woman movie, where she introduces Chris Pine's character as another actor, and then when Diana twigs it's her boyfriend, it turns into Chris Pine.
Right, exactly. That's the kind of, film language, so that we can understand what the protagonist is experiencing or seeing, right? So yeah, that kind of made sense for me, and I liked all those, because as you said earlier, and what you mentioned in your article, is this film really takes the mythology of these characters seriously and tries to make sense of it interacting in the real world. So Flash is like, he doesn't just grab Iris West from the from the car crash. He actually slowly has to put her down to the ground so the friction doesn't burn her alive, essentially. So this, it was a wonderful scene. Have you ever seen The Lost Highway?
No.
David Lynch.
No.
You haven't seen that?
No.
Wow, I thought that would be totally your kind of film, Owen. But yeah, no, because it the song in that scene is in this film. The song from the Flash saving Iris is in this film. So I thought you might have watched it. But anyway, let me go on to one or two more things from your article. Okay. And we'll discuss that. So there was a little bit here where you talk about so Zack Snyder's Justice League became as a sideline, completing a desired fantasy to restore what its director did not have the emotional energy to stomach in 2017. Having lost his daughter in the midst of filming, the mercurial director acquiesced to grief and left the project to the hands of its new co-writer. As such, the ambition that fueled the script made way for a grotesquely misconceived cut that failed to ignite the critical recognition the series needed to follow. Is this the bit I'm looking for? Yes, around the same time, rumors started to spread of the cast mistreatment, culminating in two of its star players distancing themselves from the work, and others voicing favor for a cut thought to be hidden, with the other scripts piling on Snyder's desk. Those voices, riding on the back of an inexplicable turkey, found greater support on the internet as a torrent of Twitter followers led their way to the superior cut. So let me ask you this. What was your, how did you feel about what was going on with the Snyder Cut movement? Did you hashtag ever, the Snyder Cut, like release the Snyder Cut or anything like that?
No.
No, me neither.
No. But I don't see why not. I mean, why shouldn't the fans try and champion something they think they would like in their lives?
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I think there was a minority of those fans that were a little bit over the top.
Oh yeah.
You know, and so I don't know if you know any of the like the ins and outs of what happened, because you mentioned two of the stars really kind of came out and really championed this movie, which was Ray Fisher, and I guess you're meaning by the other one, Jason Momoa, or who was the other second one you were talking about?
I think the other one was Gal Gadot, because she also came out and said that there were problems on set that she wasn't happy with.
Yeah, but she didn't. I basically all she said was that that she had a problem, and then she dealt with it, and she's fine. She was kind of responding to a question about Ray Fisher, and she said she had a problem, it was dealt with, and it was fine. So I don't think that necessarily counts. So really, you're talking about Ray Fisher.
Well, yeah, he's the big one. He's number one, really.
Yeah. And did you follow any of that, or did you?
It sounded like. I mean, I don't think he, at this stage in his career, he would try to take down Warner if he didn't have a case.
Okay, so you kind of you felt along with the kind of what was going on with Twitter, with the massive support, that he wouldn't do that. It's interesting because I don't want to, because since you haven't, I don't think you've done tons of research on it or know like a lot about it, so I'm not going to spring anything on you. But it's a really interesting thing of, a grassroots movement being, on some level being really vile to studio executives, but on another level, there was a lot going on with suicide prevention and, just the passion that went into getting this movie released. It almost impacts the viewing of the film, doesn't it? It's like the film means more knowing how many people were fighting to have it seen, and it kind of it affected me emotionally, knowing that as I was watching the film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Idris Elba made a comment that if he gets to be the first Black Bond, it's because of the fans, not because of the Bond producers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I remember he said if he was congratulating the fans. I don't think Idris Elba will be Bond. I think he's too old.
Yeah, I don't think he will be. I don't like the idea of necessarily having a Black Bond, but if there was going to be one, I think it's Idris Elba would be good. Not because I just don't think the character really makes sense being black, and necessarily for a number of reasons I'm not going to go into here. But needless to say, they're not like, I don't think, you can't have, it's just in the spy world that James Bond exists in, some of those storylines I feel would be a bit weird with a black person, like walking into like a casino like this and not being checked. Who are you? Well, what are you? I know this as a black person, so I'll be taken out of the movie if some random guy comes in. It's like that whole incognito thing of James Bond, and that's not a critique of the idea of having a black Bond. That's a critique of society, that we still live in a society where I couldn't believe a situation like that is terrible. It should be that that could happen. But going back to this grassroots movement, did I don't know if maybe it was just me, but knowing that people had fought so hard to see this movie, I really felt there were moments that really were echoed of that while watching the movie. I mean, specifically one point that you mentioned, which was, the tribute to his daughter Autumn, who had committed suicide, unfortunately. And her favorite song was played at the end. So I guess I'll put it this way: it's because this movie feels so personal, as opposed to other superhero movies, so that even its flaws, for me, can be forgiven because it's truly the work of an artist.
I agree.
It's not a committee superhero movie like a lot of them.
One thing I also would like to add, I didn't mention this in the review. I think on the back of The Irishman, which is the Martin Scorsese film, it was probably easier to release a 4-hour mainstream movie because Scorsese did it a year or two ago.
Mm-hmm. Was it 4 hours, The Irishman, or was it 3? I think it was 3.
It was closer to 4. Yeah.
Oh, it might be. Yeah, it may have been closer to 4. And then there was that other one he did, Silence or something like that. That was definitely 4 hours.
Yeah.
Right. I haven't seen it yet. It's got Adam Driver in it and other things. The film seems okay. So Kay Bailey Jones says the film is probably a good explanation. I remember that feeling when all there was relatively tame fan action and and then achieving the film. The film has more personal reactions. Yeah, I just think it's a really personal piece. And it really shows the heart of Zack Snyder more than his other movies, really. It shows it I've got an image in my head now, but it bears him naked, right? Like, I feel like it really opens him up as a filmmaker to all his flaws and what's great about him as well. It's really up there stark naked for everyone to judge him. He doesn't take out the woman sniffing Arthur's jumper, in the beginning of the movie, right? Which I'm sure he must have been aware people are going to feel this is weird, but he leaves it in. The woman, there's a woman in Iceland and she's sniffing Aquaman's jumper. So it's got all the worst and all the best of Zack Snyder all in this one piece. And it makes it all that more compelling to watch in that sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I'll read one more bit to see if we can, maybe. So I was actually curious about this last bit. So with a timber this thick, the movie calls to attention the European masterworks that showcase a changing continent in the face of tremendous upheaval. Like Otto Mezzo, this cut wraps its viewers on the triumphs that await the most deserving. Like Hamlet, this chronicle laces its story through a series of crisp, kaleidoscopic composites, and much like Kowalski's superlative Three Colors trilogy, the arcs that drove the heroes through times of grief, union, and war hold tremendous pathos in their shared synergies. So walk me through that sentence, or that little bit.
There was something.
What was your feeling there?
There was a great kind of. It felt like Snyder was making a European film more than a Hollywood movie. So like, I've noticed in European cinema, it's less about like plot. It's more about the texture and the tone and the feeling, which I feel was what Snyder was going with. So it's these little moments that add up to a great big one. Again, going back to Scorsese, he's probably the American director who borrows most from European cinema. So Goodfellas and Irishman are more about tiny moments, coming together, culminating, rather than going with a conventional narrative.
And what kind of moments in the film were those tiny moments that you felt paid off to the big moment in this Justice League movie?
Well, for example, Steppenwolf talking to Desaad. Am I pronouncing his name right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Straight from the comics. Yeah, Desaad.
Where Steppenwolf thinks this is his moment to redeem himself, and ultimately it comes to failure, and Desaad just turns to Darkseid and said, I told you he wasn't up for the task. It's that real raw feeling of emotion.
So yeah, it seems like Steppenwolf, like, really as a villain, like, kind of really worked for you as the villain of the piece, because you mentioned him a couple of times. Yeah, I mean, one of those. Go on.
Because he's ultimately just a chess piece. I mean, Darkseid is the queen or the king, and they're sending out their bishop or their castle to be slaughtered.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I like that about him, and there was a pathos to him underlying that. I think for me, the moment that really kind of paid off, that you're talking about, where it's a tiny, intimate moment that paid off in this big, spectacular way, was the Flash is talking to his dad, and his dad says, "You're the best of the best, son. You can do anything you want." And that pays off right at the end with Flash finally running through the Speed Force, which is one of the most incredible scenes I've ever seen. I wish I could see that on the big screen in IMAX, but it's one of the most incredible scenes I've ever seen in a comic book movie, of him just running through the Speed Force, and actually, literally, you see him reversing time, and he's like, dad, speaking to his dad. As I said, it's like that about gods and their dysfunctional families, and he's speaking to his dad, saying, "I hope you know I was one of the best, Dad." I was almost in tears in that moment, and so it really struck me when people were saying this film has no heart or emotion. I was like, I don't know if I saw the same film. It's the same film as you.
It's interesting. This is ultimately a film about children and their parents, and considering that this is directed by a father who lost his child very tragically, that adds like a real emotional resonance to it.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, tell me, like, final thoughts. So you really think it's a masterpiece? Where would you rank it in the DCEU, out of interest?
For the DCEU, number one, with Wonder Woman at a close second.
Yeah, me too. I've got Joker. So I've got this one. This one. I know Joker doesn't count, but I always add Joker because it's a multiverse. So I've got Zack Snyder's Justice League, then Joker, then Wonder Woman, then Shazam, and I'm not sure about the rest. Did you like Shazam, or was that not your thing?
It was fine. It's aimed at a younger audience, but yeah, it was fun.
The ending was good. I thought it still played into that, that DC trope of, still grounding these bigger than life characters in something that is emotionally resonant, like, the foster care system, and this guy who's just looking for family. So I thought it works better than a lot of Marvel origins. I think Marvel does team up movies a little bit better than it does like the 6 solo movies, and I think DC does better solo movies. But I thought this team up movie felt like 5 solo movies together, right? Like, it was the solo movie of Wonder Woman, the solo movie of Superman, the solo movie just put together, and which was a kind of interesting way to go about it. But yeah, final thoughts on the movie.
I think it's a bit of an art pop masterpiece. I think it's, I mean, by 5 stars, is it a perfect 5 stars? No. Is it a comic book 5 star? For sure.
Right. That's what I would say. For me, it's a comic book. You know, you can't call it a masterpiece in relation to Seventh Seal or something like that. But as far as these comic book movies go, I would put it up there with The Dark Knight, with, you know, Wonder Woman and Batman Begins, and Avengers Infinity War, Avengers 1, Iron Man. I think there are a class of movies that really did something very different with the comic book genre, and pushed it a little bit to do more intriguing things. So yeah, like, and Black Panther as well, I'd put up there with that. But yeah, it's one of those. Yeah, I think it's a zeitgeist comic book movie. That's what I put it as. Each of those movies are good to varying degrees in terms of what they do on a purely filmmaking level. But I think all of them have in common that they have this zeitgeist moment about them that you know, that really pushes people emotionally to, you know, to one degree or the other, either love it or hate it, whatever it may be.
That's true.
So yeah, thanks, man, for discussing this article you wrote. I thought it was a really, really good article. It was very thought-provoking, so I wanted to bring you on here and talk about some of its themes and your thoughts on the movie. And yeah, really, really grateful that you'd come on and discuss this with me.
I've written some other pieces for Far Out. I interviewed Lenny Abrahamson when he directed Normal People last year, so that's also on Far Out.
Oh wow, I'd love to. I'll watch that and maybe talk to you about it sometime. That would be good. Because I like film, and you know, if you've got any other film pieces that we can discuss, I'll happily discuss that. But yeah, to everybody, to all the viewers, please give me a high five, smash the like button, and comments. Would love your comments on this discussion. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us. See you on the flip side. Love you 3000. Peace. You can stay. Don't worry. You can stay. Love you 3000, guys.